Harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause deterioration in a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, give up harsh words which are unpleasant to others. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Habitual disturbing emotions are hard to stop through counteractions. Armed with antidotes, the guards of mindfulness and mental alertness destroy disturbing emotions like attachment at once, as soon as they arise. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. In brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness, mental alertness, accomplish others' good. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. To remove the suffering of limitless beings, understanding the purity of the three spheres, dedicate the virtue for making such effort to enlightenment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. For all who want to train on the bodhisattva path, I have written the 37 practices of bodhisattvas, following what has been said by the excellent ones on the meaning of the sutras, tantras, and treatises. Though not poetically pleasing to scholars, owing to my poor intelligence and lack of learning, I relied on the sutras and the words of the excellent, so I think these bodhisattva practices are without error. However, as the great deeds of bodhisattvas are hard to fathom for one of my poor intelligence, I beg the excellent to forgive all faults, such as contradictions and non sequiturs. Through the virtue from this, may all living beings gain the ultimate and conventional altruistic intention, and thereby become like the protector Chenrezig, who dwells in neither extreme, not in the world, nor in peace. Hey, good morning, everyone. If any of you don't have this little blue book, please feel free to take one as White Lotus's a gift to you. Garam Pache, picture in the front, has given out, I think, probably tens of thousands of these in different languages. He's got we've seen them in Russian, Ukrainian, Spanish, Chinese, Estonian, Portuguese, you name it, French, certainly. And it was composed by a Tibetan monk in probably the 1300s or 13th century. I'm not sure exactly. But it is, Garam Pache says that the entire Buddhist path is in this little book when you know how to read it, so to speak. And so it's tremendously useful because it's not overly technical. And, you can read one verse or you can read the whole thing every day. And you can obviously have references to the experiences that we come across in our life. Dalai Lama has said that there are three great texts that came out of India, one on conduct, one on the philosophical view, and one on meditation. And the great book on his favorite book, he says, is the one on conduct, in Sanskrit, the Bodhicharyavatara from Shantideva. So entering the Bodhisattva path by the Indian monk Shantideva. He says that's his favorite book. And this little 37 practices is kind of like the summation of that book in just very brief verses, but nonetheless a valuable text and very, very useful. So please take one. We're so fortunate here because the full range of Buddhist teachings has been transmitted. It's such a remarkable history. You had the experiences, the life of the Shakyamuni Buddha, maybe 500, 600 years before Christ. And so India developed, Buddhism developed in India, land of its birth, for about, 1,500 years. And it started kind of declining. At that point, it went to Tibet, and it's gone to all sorts of other countries too. But my point is that the Tibetans did this remarkable thing, that they were very, militarily powerful. nation. They had conquered the capital of China, Xi'an. They had the Chinese emperor as a peace treaty, had given his daughter as a queen to the emperor of Tibet. There's still in Lhasa today is this stone, like not a tower, it's just like a pillar, but it commemorates the peace treaty between Tibet and China at that time. And then the Tibetan emperor decided, like top down, said, okay, we're going to be Buddhists now. They didn't have a written language, for instance. And so at the peak of Buddhist cultural development in India, the Tibetans sent their best and brightest over the Himalaya for like a period of like 300 years, bringing back the full range of the teachings. And so this is extremely important, because by having that full range of the teachings, it means that you don't have to fit yourself into sort of a preordained, pre-designed spiritual box. If you can squeeze into this box, things will work for you. Instead, it's just wide open, because especially a great teacher there are just so many methods. But even without the direction of a teacher, we can sort of find our way on the path, because again, human beings are also different in terms of their sort of their makeup, you might say, or what attracts for them, what works for them, whatever. And so this complete display of 84,000 different heaps of teachings, it means that as long as you have this fundamental conviction, even just open to the possibility of it, that we each have Buddha nature, and that this can be developed to the extent that the Buddha developed it himself, realized it, manifested it. As long as that's there, then these practices work. And they're just methods. Like the Buddha said, his teachings, his methods are a finger pointing at the moon. It's not the moon itself. Actually, in the end, it is. But it's not the moon itself. It's the teachings are provisional. There are definitive teachings too. But even there, when you're talking about absolute truth, we have to express it in conventional relative terms. So we live in a paradoxical state as human beings. And yet the genius is that there can be a leap into the absolute, you might say. So it's just rich with metaphors, with symbols, with methods. And happily for us, we've been able to live at a time when people who are traditionally trained in Tibet, even with a great tragedy of modern Tibetan history, are still alive and have been transmitting the teachings. So that's very helpful. When you see an example like that, definitely increases one's confidence, because, you see stuff with all the bullshit stripped away, you might say. I'm not saying the Dharma is bullshit, but I mean all the kinds of things that people accrete onto something that they might even be enthusiastic about, and then attach to this process of clinging, continues. But to see that that's not necessary, that that's not there, is extremely strengthening. With the great Lama, you see someone who loves you more than you love yourself. It's completely unnerving, because it's not some sort of saccharine kind of thing that you might expect. We have these self-clinging ideas of how it's supposed to be. Our ego wants to take over the very process of dissolution of the ego. This is the paradox we live with. And it's that self-conscious grasping that is actually an obstacle, but yet the methods work. So, you can do hours and hours and hours and hours of mantra, even with a great skeptical mind, but yet there's something there in you that's keeping you there. And you can have an insight. When you drop your own drama for a moment, it's even from, I think it was the poet William Blake, he said, if we only could cleanse the doors of perception, the world would appear as it is, infinite. But we can't really trick ourselves into that, but we have to practice. So at any rate, what's wonderful here in our own humble way is been presenting the full range of methods. And what are those? Well, one, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche passed away, but contemporary Lama explained it that, you're walking through a forest of poisonous trees, and they all have poisonous fruit. And the practice is for you to cut down the trees. So you have an axe, which is a concentration practice, mindfulness. And then there's a sharp edge of that axe, which is vipassana, which is the proper view, the proper insight, the proper understanding. And with that heavy axe, you're chopping down the tree. And of course, the tree falls down, no more poisonous fruit. And that is self-liberation. It's said that this is a very advanced state, but it is selfish, you might say, in a way. It said in the text, it said you can even remain in this painless state for like an eon. But then at some point, a light comes from the heart of the Buddha to your heart, and you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I'm here without pain, but all those sentient beings out there, they're really free, but they don't know it. And so they're living in a state of dissatisfaction. I have to do something about that. This is the beginning of the Mahayana. So in the Mahayana practice, you're walking through the same poisonous forest, but now you're picking that poisonous fruit, and you take a little bit of it as an antidote, kind of like homeopathy or something, like, a hair off the tail of the dog that bit you, that kind of thing. And so the poisonous fruit is what? Well, let's say hatred. But the little antidote we're making is patience. So we're training ourselves that as hatred arises in the mind, to practice patience. We're always doing an antidote. Antidote. And we're doing in this conventional mind that we have. So the greatness of this is that you don't have to, go somewhere else, be enlightened, all these kinds of wonderful things. Instead, you use your ordinary mind, but you're training, learning what the antidotes are, and then again and again and again. And of course, this is a gradual process. So this is why the faith is so essential, because that's the core that's going through the whole thing. But it's not stupid faith. It's from your study, it's from your experience, it's from your intuition, it's from your reasoning. So how does it work? Well, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to give this a try. Patience is better than hatred. I'm driving down the highway and some guy cuts me off. And, I flip him the bird and I insult his mother as I'm yelling and screaming at him. And then I realize, oh, I'm supposed to be practicing patience. So the next time, a little bit better. And what happens? The first thing that goes is the big physical manifestation. I'm no longer flipping the bird, but I'm shouting at the guy and I'm thinking to myself, I wish he were dead. So my mind and my speech are not tamed yet. But as we just keep going, because of the continuity of faith, which is confidence, eventually what happens? Well, I'm no longer flipping the bird. I'm no longer yelling at the guy. I'm still thinking, oh my goodness, I wish you were dead. So we see how fluid the mind is and how you can't grab onto it at all. You're actually seeing the nature of the mind, but in this conventional way. And eventually, if you believe the text, eventually you can tame the mind. And then what do we do? Instead of this knee-jerk reaction, we're actually generating motivation. You see your commonality, that he was my mother in a previous lifetime. And so it becomes, oh, mom, you're doing it again, which is completely better for you. It's completely, less agitation. But it's also the path to Buddhahood. That's where the faith comes in. But nonetheless, and then you don't feel that radical alienation. So that's the conventional Mahayana. But then you can be walking through the same poisonous forest, and now you pick the poisonous fruit and you take a big bite out of it. This is a remarkable method This is Tantra. This is Mantrayana, where we transmute, where we are basically working with the energy of our negative emotions. And out of this vast motivation to liberate all, we can do this. It's a little bit hard to believe, but it's based on this tremendous vow of loving kindness and compassion, object-less compassion. Because in our ordinary dualistic way, we experience wisdom as compassion. But this is the full range of these teachings. And it's really wonderful because, different strokes for different folks, but also different points in our career. And it's complete. So the skillfulness of it is really something to observe. Those that said that the Tantra is for our particular historic times when the emotions are very rough, the negative emotions are very rough. And when people are kind of upside down, the people are seeing, the society sees virtue as being non-virtue and sees non-virtue as being virtuous, everything's goofed up. The Tantra can work with those times. So it's said to be especially for these times. And as you practice it a little bit, first you see the reaction, the response of teachers that you would maybe have never any idea of this kind of method. Like, I'm attracted to meditation. That's all excellent. And then suddenly, you have interactions with someone like Garwin Pache, and he says, why don't you do this practice? I'm thinking, I don't have any connection to that practice. It doesn't work. I don't have any interest in that. But you have such respect for a teacher like that, okay, I'll try it. In order to have some time with a teacher, you need to go to a 7-day retreat, and doing that, you find out our ego is trying to control its own dissolution. It's just a paradox of paradox. So there are wonderful surprises that happen, kind of like the surprise of being born. My goodness, how did this happen? So through a little bit of experience, you start to see the extreme skillfulness of it. Everything becomes alive. To give you an idea, self-liberation, when we close a door, we don't slam it. Why? Because we're practicing mindfulness and we're just doing things properly. But on the conventional Mahayana level, we don't slam the door. Why? Because it's going to disturb others. On the tantric level, we don't slam the door because there are beings that are living in the door jam. They'll be hurt. So this is kind of hard for our, rigidly scientific mind. But you can see that it's pointing to the vastness of things. There's so much that we don't know, which is the true scientific mind. So, if I'm here like we are right now, and I find myself with some sort of responsibility for the organization and someone comes in and says, lo and behold, I've got a bar of gold for White Lotus. And I'm thinking, how wonderful is that? But then my meditation, it's like, man, what if the place burns down right now? We're not insured for that. And maybe I should go right now to the bank to put it in to be safe. All these thoughts are generated. Why? Because of my attachment to gold and the attachment to the actual appearance of the gold and everything associated with that. It's like nothing simple. Everything is interdependent. All the experiences I've had with gold, everything I've read about gold, good, bad, ugly, neutral, whatever, it's all there in your mind somehow. And this is the agitation of samsara. This is the level we exist at. But if I visualize a Buddha, myself as a Buddha with a gold crown, from the get-go, I know I'm working with my mind. I don't have the attachment to the gold. So I'm actually seeing the gold in a purer way, but in a mental way. And so this is extremely skillful because all of us right now are here in this gross form because of our mind. It's mind created. So we're going closer to the source, you might say, to working with the mind itself. And that's one reason that it's skillful. The Tibetans, of course, have so many stories and so much experience, 1,500 years. There was one, for instance, in a retreat that was going on, and they were practicing on Guru Rinpoche, and man, the monk was having some trouble. He was having some difficulty. I can't remember what it was in the story. It was like some problem he was having, and whether it was headaches or something, physical. And the teacher asked him, well, you're in your meditation, right? You're holding a begging bowl that's full of nectar, right? Yes, I'm visualizing that. What color is the nectar? And I can't remember the colors, but he said, like, well, it's red. And he said, make it clear. And so he started visualizing as clear, and the headache went away. There's a tremendous level of skillfulness with mantra, with visualization. And yet, the teachers make it simple at the same time so that we're not lost in the weeds, so to speak. So what are we doing? Normally, I'm here, and what do? I impute my solitary existence on myself. If I start cutting myself up, physically or mentally, I can't find Frank there. There's no Frank there. But yet, I act as if there is. Everything is revolving around this imputation of Frank on this meat body and mind. So in the Tantra, what is skillful is that we visualize ourselves. It starts out with motivation, has to be coming out of that. The great motivation of bodhicitta and taking refuge, stop looking around for temporary kind of solutions. We want the real deal. And then we say this mantra, Om Svabhava Shuddha Sarva Dharma Svabhava Shuddha Hang, and we drop our attachment to ordinary appearances. Just drop it. And this is the state of emptiness, even though, we won't realize even that we're experiencing it because our mind is so habituated to thought after thought after thought. But nonetheless, we do that. And out of that comes the seed syllable of what particular Buddha we're practicing, the deity. This word deity is unfortunate too, because it has so many connotations in the West. Someone asked Lama Tarchin, what does deity mean? He said, great exaltation. So now we impute ourself to be Tara or Vajrakalaya or Guru Rinpoche or whatever. And that imputation is pure because it's mind generated. It doesn't have all the baggage that we naturally have and we can't get rid of. It's not like we're taking out the trash, that I'm just going to get my bad habits and just throw them out. We are hardwired this way. It's in our very flesh. So in the Tantra, we're offering bones as anger. We're offering flesh as desire. Because we can give these things away, but when we're doing it mentally, it's more powerful, you might say. But nonetheless, this full range and going all the way to Dzogchen, the great perfection, or Mahamudra, the great seal of reality. And Khenpo can teach those, We've got the Tilopa teaching on the shore, on the banks of the Ganges, this great Mahamudra text. And then there's Shabkar's flight of the Garuda, the great Dzogchen text. So the Garuda in symbology, is this mythical creature, face of a hawk, but I think it's like a lion at the same time. But it said in one flap of the wings, it goes from the lowest hell to the highest existence. This is our nature. So this is a little daunting for us because, you see the tremendous knowledge and training that goes on. Khenpo's, 12 years studying the texts, memorizing them, debating them, being tested on them, and out of a culture that is supportive of those texts too. So it's like a tremendous education. They have all of that, and they have that in their practice too, which is just tremendously wonderful. Here we are in America, at least having confidence that there's something worthwhile there, trying to present the whole range, because you never know what's going to Lama Tarchin told Gretchen once, for instance, that there are two ways to really help beings. One, you can be like a temple and present the full range of the teachings. So something for everyone. He says, or you can be like a yogi. You can go off in a cave with one particular practice. As you develop, you're actually able to manifest other beings, mind-generated beings, to help others. And it's at a certain level, those beings lose awareness of themselves as even being emanations. They seem to have an independent existence. Totally mind-boggling. But you're affecting everyone, though you're just alone in your cave. So we attempt to present the full range. Why? Because it works. We've got 2,600 years of history, of experience. And for us, it's been especially fortunate, having to meet the Tibetans as human beings, because, you see human beings, no romanticism there. And yet this tremendous benefit of their culture, and a lot of the doubts that we have to work through that they don't necessarily, just like I have confidence in Einstein, although don't really ask me what he was teaching, but I do believe there's something valid there, right? And beneficial. The Tibetans are like that with the Dharma. Whereas for us, we have to overcome, certain kind of doubts, certain kind of, the Zen koan, it says, in the bull, the ox jumps through the window, but somehow the tail didn't make it. So we got to work on our tails. Okay. Well, I didn't get to say what I was going to talk about today, but that's okay. That's okay. Let's take a tea break, and then we will do a little practice together. Okay. First, any questions? Anybody first before we break? If there are any. Samana. Yeah, I read it the other night. Yeah, in the Mahamudra text. I don't have it with me, but it means basically the essence of everything is without essence, and may that be generated or realized. I'll find it. It's a footnote in the Moonbeams of Mahamudra text. Takbadashi. Anyway, I'll get that for you. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. We are, even if it's just conceptually in our mind, we're realizing that the deity is not sort of a glorified Frank. We drop Frank altogether. And that is the complete limitlessness. Like the Dalai Lama says, it's like the sky. It's just completely vast. You can't grab onto it. You can't do it. And yet it's blue and color. It has quality. It's not just an emptiness and nothingness, just a mere potentiality. It's like alive, but boundless, nothing you can say. So even in our training, we know we're going there, and we avoid the huge mistake of thinking, I'm going to make myself, that people do this with a wrathful deity. They think it's all about anger or something. I mean, there are pitfalls with the Tantra, especially. The conventional Mahayana is totally safe because you're just getting hammered, so to speak, again and again and again with loving kindness and compassion, just like our little booklet. Bad things happen. Oh, you have to treat that person like it's your child. The Tantra, because it's more subtle, you have to make sure that fundamental motivation is there, even if it's just read in the mind. Because and myself, I can read all the wonderful text, and then you're out there doing your own stupid things again. But there's something different, because it's like there's one light in Mammoth Cave. Even just generating conceptually that motivation is not 100% diluted anymore. I told you the story once about this American who went to Japan in the early 1950s, visiting different monasteries. And at the end, they had a closing ceremony every night, and all the monks were chanting, Great Way without I vow to liberate endless mind passions. I vow to uproot downward gates without limit. I vow to penetrate the great way of Buddha. I vow to attain, this bodhicitta vow that they say before they go to bed as they end their evening meditation. And this Westerner who was very educated, he had been at Columbia University, met some great scholars in that, but sort of full of himself, said to the Zen master, do they really believe that? And the master said, not in the beginning. So that's the training, it's the repetition again and again and again and again. Okay. Yeah, Keen. Yeah, a football is empty. Because it's empty, it's useful. Because it's empty, you can throw it in the Super Bowl. Because it's empty, it has form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Yeah. But that's profound. That's a profound question. It really is. And not an easy thing. Okay, let's take a break and we'll come back.